Welcome back to the Information Daily Online podcast for another deep dive. And today, well, let's just say it's a pretty historic one. Donald Trump's second inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
It's January 20th, 2025, a pretty unique moment in American history, you could say.
Yeah, no kidding. So imagine this. Washington, D.C. is trying to stay warm, bundle up against the Kälte, which I'm told is German for freezing cold.
That's right.
So for the first time since Ronald Reagan's second inauguration way back in 1985, this whole ceremony is happening inside the Capitol building.
Definitely adds a kind of unique feel to the day.
For sure. And there's a lot to unpack here. A guest list with pretty much every big name, globally heightened security naturally, and a musical lineup that's got people talking.
Well, let's start with the basics. The U.S. Constitution says the new president's term has to begin at noon on January 20th.
So that means for anyone listening in Germany, Trump officially becomes president at 6 p.m. their time.
Exactly, and he'll be taking the oath of office inside the Capitol building.
Which is interesting considering what happened 4 years ago with the attack on the Capitol by his supporters.
Yeah, it really highlights the divisions that still exist in America today, and it'll be fascinating to see how that affects things today.
And of course, we can't forget Trump is going down in history as the oldest U.S. president ever sworn in.
He is beating Biden's age at his inauguration by 5 months.
A sign of the times, maybe?
Okay.
Now, let's talk about this guest list. It's a mix of tech giants, people from all over the world, and some faces we've seen in past administrations.
From the tech world, there's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and get this, TikTok CEO Shou Chew.
Wow, considering Trump tried to ban TikTok before, that's kind of surprising.
It is. It makes you wonder what Trump's stance on tech regulation will be this time around.
Maybe a change from outright bans to something a little more well thought out.
Lots of people are asking that question, especially with how influential these companies are globally.
Yeah. We've also got a pretty diverse group of world leaders attending. Viktor Orban from Hungary, who's known for his right-wing populist views. Italy's Giorgia Meloni, another leader with a similar outlook. And Javier Milei from Argentina, a libertarian economist who won a surprise victory in their recent presidential election.
It's a pretty interesting mix of leaders alongside traditional U.S. allies. Really makes you think about what Trump's foreign policy will look like this term.
Definitely raises some questions about what kind of alliances we might see and what that means for global politics. It really highlights how connected everything is in the world. And speaking of connections, if you're enjoying this deep dive as much as we are, make sure you're following the Information Daily online podcast. We're all about giving you the insights you need to understand current events. And hey, why not share this episode with anyone who wants to learn more about what's happening in the world? But getting back to the inauguration, let's talk about the guests from Germany and the UK.
Okay, so from Germany, we've got AfD co-chair Tino Kruppala and AfD deputy leader Beatrix von Storch, both big players in the right-wing populist party. And from the UK, we have Nigel Farage, the Brexit advocate, known for speaking his mind.
Seeing these figures from European right-wing populist movements at a U.S. president's inauguration is interesting, don't you think?
It really does. It speaks to the growing trend of populism and nationalism globally. Makes you wonder about the future of transatlantic relations, for sure.
Now onto the former U.S. presidents. All the living ones are attending Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, which is pretty standard for these events. But someone's missing Michelle Obama.
That is noteworthy, especially given the not-so-great relationship between the Obamas and the Trumps.
It definitely shows that the political and maybe even personal tensions haven't gone away completely. But even though Michelle Obama isn't there, outgoing President Joe Biden will be.
Which is interesting considering Trump skipped Biden's inauguration back in 2021.
It is. What do you think it says about Biden's approach now that he's not president anymore?
Maybe he wants to stay involved in politics, or maybe it's a show of respect for the office of the president, even though he might not agree with Trump.
Definitely suggests he plans to stay active in the political scene. Now let's talk about security, which is obviously a big topic.
Yeah, after the assassination attempt on Trump during the campaign, security for this inauguration has been amped up considerably.
There's going to be a huge security presence, something like 25,000 police officers and soldiers.
Wow.
Protecting the White House, the Capitol building, and parts of Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a big change from the protests we saw at Trump's first inauguration in 2017.
Yeah, this time they're expecting much smaller demonstrations. Maybe it's because people are tired of protesting, or maybe activist groups are focusing their energy elsewhere.
It'll be interesting to see how the security and the overall atmosphere play out today.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the political climate and the kind of threats people in power face, especially after what happened on January 6th.
It does. But hey, let's move on to something a little less serious for a minute.
Ah,
How about the entertainment for the inauguration?
right, the music. It's always interesting to see who they get to perform. And in this case, it's a pretty big deal because back in 2017, Trump had a tough time finding performers for his first inauguration.
Yeah, I remember that. A lot of artists didn't want to be associated with him because of his controversial views and policies.
Exactly. But this time around, he seems to have pulled together a more well-rounded lineup. For the ceremony itself, Carrie Underwood will be singing America the Beautiful.
A classic choice for these events.
Definitely. And then there's Lee Greenwood performing his big hit God Bless the USA, which was pretty much a must-have at Trump's rallies during the campaign.
It seems like a pretty deliberate choice to tap into that patriotic feeling and connect with his base.
For sure. These songs also highlight the cultural divide in the U.S., with country music often seen as representing more conservative values taking center stage.
Right. And then we have the inaugural balls. Those are always a sight to see. And this year's lineup is, well, let's just say it's interesting.
Interesting is one way to put it. We've got the Village People, known for their disco hits and flashy costumes, sharing the stage with country stars like Jason Aldean, Rascal Flatts, and Gavin DeGraw.
That's quite the mix, disco country pop. What do you think Trump's going for here with this musical mashup? Is he trying to set a certain tone for his second term?
Maybe it's his way of saying he wants to be more inclusive, appealing to a wider audience, not just his core supporters. Or maybe it's just Trump being Trump, you know? His taste has always been a bit all over the
It's
place.
true. Whatever the reason, it's definitely got people talking.
Yeah.
But the inauguration is just the start, right? The real work begins on day one, and Trump has made it pretty clear he's ready to get things moving.
Absolutely. He's planning to sign a ton of executive orders on his first day back in office, mainly to undo a lot of what Biden did.
Sounds like he also completely rewind the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's a bold move that's sure to face some pushback from Democrats and maybe even some legal challenges. But it shows how determined he is to make his mark and reshape things his way. And this brings us back to those tech CEOs we talked about earlier.
Right. What kind of impact do you think these executive orders could have on the tech industry? Think he'll try to go after TikTok again? Or maybe set his sights on companies like Facebook and Google?
It's the question everyone in Silicon Valley is asking. The tech industry has been under the microscope lately with all the concerns about data privacy, antitrust issues, and the spread of misinformation.
And Trump's not afraid to use his power to target specific companies.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the tech world is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Totally. And let's not forget about the potential impact on social programs. Trump's been pretty vocal about cutting government spending, and he might try to reduce funding for things like healthcare, education, and Social Security.
That could have a huge impact on a lot of Americans, especially those who depend on these programs. It makes you wonder if he'll actually follow through on his campaign promises to protect Social Security.
It's a good point. His approach to social programs will be under a lot of scrutiny because it often reveals a lot about a president's priorities and values. As we dig deeper into these potential policy changes, it's important to remember that politics isn't just some game played in Washington, D.C. It affects people's lives in a real way, both here and around the world.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that staying informed and engaged is so important, especially during times like these. If you're finding this deep dive into Trump's second inauguration helpful, don't forget to follow the Information Daily online podcast. It's the best way to stay on top of what's happening in the world. We'll be right back after a quick break to continue our look at this pivotal moment in American history. Okay, we're back and ready to jump back into our look at Donald Trump's second inauguration as President of the United States. We've covered a lot of ground already. The unique setting inside the Capitol building, the mix of guests, and of course his plans for big policy changes.
We have.
It's worth thinking about what all of this really means. What does this inauguration tell us about where American politics is headed? And maybe even about the world in general.
It's a good question. There are a lot of things happening at the same time right now. The rise of populism, people losing trust in institutions, growing political divides, and then you have all this rapid technological change. It's like everything's coming together at this moment.
Yeah, it feels like we're watching a bunch of different timelines collide. You've got the things that happened during Trump's first term, the shadow of the January 6th attack, and this feeling of a nation trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world.
It's a complicated time for sure, both here in the U.S. and globally. And the decisions made by the U.S. government, especially with someone like Trump in charge, have an impact on everyone.
Definitely. The world is watching, waiting to see what direction this second term will take. Will it be more of the America First policies from his last administration? Or will we see something different, maybe a move towards more global cooperation and diplomacy? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But we can look for hints in the little things, right? The changes in his language, the relationships he's building, the policies he focuses on. And that's what we try to do here at the Deep Dive, give you the information and insights you need to understand this constantly changing world.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the patterns, and making sense of all the things that are happening. And it's about remembering that history isn't just something we read about in books. It's happening right now all around us.
If you're finding this discussion as interesting as we are, make sure you're following the Information Daily online podcast for more deep dives like this. We break down complex topics, explore different perspectives, and help you understand what's shaping our world. And hey, why not pass this episode along to a friend who might enjoy this kind of in-depth analysis?
It's a great way to get people thinking and talking about these things.
As we wrap up our look at Trump's second inauguration, we want to leave you with a challenge. Pay attention. Ask questions. Don't believe everything you hear. And most importantly, stay curious.
Curiosity is what helps us understand things better. And understanding is so important in a world as complex as ours.
So as we watch this new chapter unfold, let's do it with a critical eye, an open mind, and a willingness to talk about the challenges and opportunities ahead. Because in the end, we all have a part to play in shaping the future.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Donald Trump's second inauguration. We'll be back soon with another fascinating look at what's happening in the world.
And thank you for listening to the Information Daily online podcast.